is time for This Week in Doom. And the main doom of the week was the world's slow and accelerating descent into totalitarianism continues this week. And there was several stories to that effect all over the world, and they all have a very similar twist to them. Let's start with this one here. Shown, obviously, this guy everybody probably knows. And then this Lex Luthor-looking MFer here, that is a guy by the name of Alexandre de Moraes. He is a judge in Brazil, and he has just ordered the nationwide shutdown of X, formerly known as Twitter, across the entire country. Not only has he ordered the shutdown of X, but he has announced that they will be fining any Brazilian citizen up to $9,000 a day for using a VPN to access Twitter. And just to put that $9,000 fine in perspective, the median household income in Brazil is $16,921 a year. So that's basically the equivalent of a $50,000 fine a day for using Twitter in X. Now, Melody is going to go into more detail on this story in just a few minutes, but this basically boils down to the fact that X was ordered to provide the name of an individual that Brazil could reach out to every time there is something on X that they want censored. And Elon Musk is refusing to provide the name of that individual, saying X is dedicated to free speech. And I got a couple of quotes here. This is from an ex-company statement. When we attempted to defend ourselves in court, Judge de Moraes threatened our Brazilian legal representative with imprisonment, and then the legal representative resigned. Even after she resigned, the judge froze all of her bank accounts, the company wrote. Imagine being fined for formerly working for a company and quitting because you're in an impossible situation, and they take all your money anyway. X and its former incarnation, Twitter, have been banned in several countries, mostly authoritarian regimes such as Russia, China, Iran, Myanmar, North Korea, Venezuela, and Turkmenistan. Other countries such as Pakistan, Turkey, and Egypt have also temporarily suspended X before, usually to quell dissent and unrest. Twitter was banned in Egypt after the Arab Spring uprisings, which some dubbed the Twitter Revolution, but it has since been restored. And again, guys, always ask yourself, because a lot of times they're saying, oh, it's only about far-right disinformation or we're trying to stop crime. Always imagine, if you're in favor of one side having the power, imagine the other side having that same power. And if it changes your opinion, then chances are nobody should have that power. Keep that in mind as we go through these stories. And meanwhile, France is saying, hold my wine, because also going on this week, we had Telegram CEO Pavel Durov was arrested in France. Now, Durov, billionaire Telegram CEO Pavel Durov, was invested in France on Saturday. Multiple French officials confirmed amid an apparent investigation into whether Telegram, a freewheeling and sometimes controversial messaging and social networking platform, allows crime on its app, in part due to a lack of moderation. And it's that last part that you got to pay attention to, guys, the lack of moderation, because I think that's really what is going on here, because there is crime that happens on pretty much all of these apps, but certain apps are letting the government see behind the scenes and allowing them to order certain messaging to be suppressed, and some apps are not allowing it. Allegations against Durov, who is also a French citizen, include that his platform is being used for child sexual abuse material and drug trafficking, and that Telegram refused to share information or documents with investigators when required by law. And let me just say how encouraged I am to see global power centers taking seriously the distribution of child sex abuse material. And I would just remind everybody about this guy. It's amazing. I guess they finished solving all of this crime because now they're arresting the Telegram CEO, and I'm sure it's got nothing to do with censorship or turning over the keys to the back channels of social media and everything about stopping child sexploitation. And that's why law enforcement and power centers around the world are still not resting as they relentlessly pursue the names of all of Jeffrey Epstein's clients, right? Oh, that's right. They're not doing that. Maybe we'll just move right on from that one. But luckily, this kind of thing never happens in the United States, right? Not so much. Mark Zuckerberg released a letter to Congressman Jim Jordan this week confirming the unfounded conspiracy theory. Remember that conspiracy theory? You know, we're going to go ahead. We're just going to don the tinfoil hat because Zuckerberg basically confirmed yet another formerly crazy conspiracy theory was in fact the truth. In a letter to Rep. Jim Jordan, the Republican chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Zuckerberg alleges that the officials, including those from the White House, repeatedly pressured Facebook for months to take down certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire. They censored jokes. All right, just take that in for a second. They made jokes against the rules. And by the way, I am wondering, will we be labeled with that COVID-19 context as YouTube often does? I don't know if that's going to happen. I did say it out loud, and the algorithms often peruse content. And if they hear the word COVID-19, they slap that little context label on it. So a little social experiment. Will we be labeled for that as well? Zuckerberg also expressed regret for Meta's downplaying of content related to coverage by the New York Post about Hunter Biden ahead of the 2020 election that the FBI warned may be rooted in a Russian disinformation operation. We hear a lot about election interference and a lot about Russian disinformation. Remember, guys, this story ended up being true. Facebook was pressured by the FBI. I wonder what the FBI used as a basis for that pressure in order to censor a story that would prove to be very damaging to one candidate, something that Facebook and the FBI have still not answered for. Now, shifting gears a little bit away from totalitarian nonsense, let's talk a little bit about business. And we are looking at Warren Buffett here, the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, a.k.a. the Oracle of Omaha. And we got the story this week that once again, Berkshire Hathaway has been selling Bank of America stock. They sold about $982 million of Bank of America stock. That makes their total sales since just mid-July $5.4 billion. It's worth pointing out that Berkshire Hathaway still has about $36 billion worth of Bank of America stock, but they are selling stocks hand over fist and raising cash. And check out this. This is the amount of cash at Berkshire Hathaway. Berkshire's cash pile hits a record $277 billion. They have been slashing their stake in Apple and Bank of America and virtually all of their stocks, now sitting on their biggest cash pile ever. They are 25% allocated to cash right now, which means Warren Buffett, one of the most famous investors in the world, is pre-positioned for a crash in the stock market. He is getting ready to go on a shopping spree and buy up assets on the cheap after whatever happens. So keep that in mind as retail continues to pile into stocks and continues to bid up tech stocks to obscene valuations. One of the most famous investors in the world is sitting on more cash, selling stocks as retail buys them. In another story going on overseas this week, pay attention to what's happening in Libya. Could be the makings of another civil war in this country. Now, Libya has been divided into two different governments, one in the western part of the country that is backed by most Western and NATO governments, and then another in the eastern part of the country. There's been an uneasy truce since about 2020 in Libya. But just this week, Libya's oil output falls by more than half due to a political standoff. And this centers around the central bank. Now, Libya produces about 1.25 million barrels of oil per day. And at least half of that, up to 1 million barrels per day, actually, has been disrupted in oil production over this dispute over who is going to control the Libyan central bank. This week, the Western government seized control of the Libyan central bank, driving out the Eastern government representatives who were occupying the post. And in a kind of hilarious, kind of not story midweek, we got this one from Bloomberg. Libya's central bank coup turns to farce with a plea for passwords because the Eastern governors who were running the central bank, when they left, they took all the passwords to the systems with them. And now the Western government officials can't access Libya's central bank or banking system. And banks across the country have been frozen. Oil production has been shut down. Oil shipments have been halted because there's no way to process the payments. So keep an eye on what is happening in Libya. Also going on this week, something we talked about on Wednesday in our DNN update. Hindenburg Research, a famous short-selling firm, released an update about Super Microcomputer, one of the darlings of the AI mania. And in that short report, Hindenburg Research revealed that Supermicro had been dealing with third-party companies that weren't really third-party companies because these companies are run by the brother of Supermicro's CEO, Charles Lang. They all own shares of each other's companies, and that this is widespread opportunity for financial accounting fraud, something that I would remind everybody Supermicro has a documented history of. They were delisted in 2018 from the NASDAQ for failure to file timely financial reports. And then in 2020, they were charged for financial fraud by the SEC. A lot of their executives resigned in disgrace over that scandal. And another thing the Hindenburg report pointed out was that all of those executives were hired back 3 months after the SEC left the building. And it looks like they started doing the same things all over again. On top of that, there was things included about quality control issues at Supermicro, how Dell is taking a lot of their business, and how Supermicro is violating sanctions. And then just a day after that report, Supermicro all but confirmed what Hindenburg had accused them of. When this story hit, Supermicro slides on 10K delay following Hindenburg report. And I would just read this quote: the San Jose, California-based server maker requires additional time to complete its assessment of the design and operating effectiveness of its internal controls over financial reporting. This is a damning statement by Supermicro, which means, guys, our auditors probably won't sign off on our financial statements, and we need some time to make sure we're not doing fraud, even though we hired back the people who got caught doing the fraud last time. Supermicro stock took a dive on this news of the Hindenburg report and the delay of the financial reports. And one of Supermicro's biggest suppliers, NVIDIA, reported earnings over the week, and it was about as expected. Big revenue beat, big data center revenue beat by NVIDIA, but the market wasn't really excited about it. NVIDIA stock actually sold off a couple of percent on that news. Also, we got confirmation that NVIDIA's next generation Blackwell chips will be delayed due to some kind of a manufacturing defect that needs to be remedied prior to mass production. Those Blackwell chips were supposed to be being shipped after mass production as we speak, and it looks like we won't see those shipments begin until sometime in the fourth quarter. When pressed for details, NVIDIA executives were rather dodgy on the conference call, which may have added to investors' jitters over that stock. And last but not least, you may have seen this picture or this video going around. This is a Venezuelan gang known as Tren de Aragua, which has taken over entire segments of Aurora, Colorado. These are undocumented migrants who have come into the country for whatever reason. They were shipped to the Denver area and they settled in Aurora. And there was some back and forth between politicians who were claiming this story was real or it was the imagination. For example, we had Colorado's Governor Jared Polis dismiss the migrant gang takeover story as imagination earlier in the week. Although a day later, we had this story in CBS News: Venezuelan gang activity confirmed by Aurora officials after a release of a Colorado woman's surveillance video, which was the picture in question here. This one, guys, this Venezuelan gang, Tren de Agua, they were settled in these apartment buildings and they have taken them over. They are wandering the grounds of these apartment buildings. They hospitalized the superintendent of the building. They beat him up, put him in the hospital, drove out all of the building's management. Now they are running the building as slumlords, collecting rent from people at gunpoint, even though they don't own the building, assaulting anybody who challenges their authority. And politicians seem content to just point fingers at each other rather than do anything. And it seems that when people call the police about this is what's going on, police are not responding unless serious crimes, i.e. shootings or murders, are happening. And some people are being told, why don't you just move out of the building, when calling the cops about armed gangs at their door demanding entry, robbing and collecting rent from these people. Story to keep an eye on, what's going on in Aurora, Colorado. I suspect by the end of the month, this will be a hot button campaign issue. And thus ends This Week in Doom. Back to you, Travis.
That was a wonderful round of corruption and fraud, Jack. I appreciate that. Just wanted to pull up this comment real quick. I realized today that everyone picks their echo chamber. I've picked the doomy one. Hope it's the right call. I just wanted to caution you not to do that. If you really want a good idea of what's going on in the market, you have to look at all the opinions, and you actually, and this is out of love, I'm saying this, you have to stay away from echo chambers. You have to be around people that are sharpening their perspective constantly. Echo chambers can be dangerous. That's all I wanted to say. Wanted to give a shout out real quick, and I got a question for you, Jack. Appreciate you, Miss Grace. Ain't much, but you are burning at both ends. It is a lot. It is the token of what you're doing, the generosity, the love. We thank you for that tremendously.
Thank
I
you,
have
Sheila.
something here. For you guys, this one is a good one. I don't know, Melody, maybe you know this one. Jack, maybe you know. How does the 25% cash allocation from Warren Buffett compare historically?
You know what? I glanced on a chart. They did at one point have a higher percent allocation to cash in the lead up to the GFC. They had a higher percent position, but as far as nominal dollar value, nothing comes close to this much cash. This is the biggest cash pile Buffett has ever sat on in his life.
Melody, anything else you want to add there? I'm going to get right into the house market update then. Good.
Trout,
Okay.
Could I real quick? Could I, if I could, you know, I just going through that, there was a lot of stories there, and I just want to recognize that there's really no way to tell these stories without your own personal bias shining through. And I obviously have mine. I have a very libertarian leaning, and I don't like criminals. I don't like pedophiles. I don't like gangs. But I think the worst criminal pedophile gangs in the world tend to be hiding in governments. And so I just want to acknowledge my own bias. Anytime I see a government reaching for power, my default is always going to be to push back on government. That's not to say things like Telegram. There are other sides of that story I didn't get into as in depth, like Russian troops are using Telegram to coordinate movements in Ukraine. Yes, there are criminals doing bad things on Telegram, right? There is child sexploitation going on there. But you know what? That's also happening on Instagram. That's also happening on Facebook. And I don't see Mark Zuckerberg in handcuffs right now because Mark Zuckerberg plays ball with the corrupt global elite. And here he is pretending to be sorry about it with his letter only because he's already been caught doing it. So again, I just have to tell you guys, and anytime you're faced with one of these stories and you're not sure about making up your mind, don't let the mainstream media tell you what your opinion is and then decide. Always ask yourself, if the other guy that I don't like had this power that they're demanding, would that worry me? Right? If Donald Trump was demanding the ability to point to specific stories and shut them down, would you be okay with that? And if the answer is no, then that should inform your decision right now. So that's
Right.
my asterisk I would put on that reporting.
And I would just add too that, you know, we also have to take into consideration that what we're witnessing is what we've called Lumi on Lumi violence, which is those people in the club who are fighting for power, and they are going to, you know, they're going to do things like what Zuckerberg did. They're going to write this letter looking like the White Knight, when in reality, this is about, you know, bargaining for specific power and things like that. And so just remember what you say all the time, and what we say is, you know, it's a big club, or it's a small club actually, and none of us are members of it. And what we're looking at is pure performance most of the time. And you know, I've worked for a politician. I can tell you this absolutely. So, but again, don't believe me, you know, do your own research, go out there and don't base what your views solely on what we say. Go test it out like you did, Jack. I know a lot of people have issues with Hindenburg, right? They definitely have an agenda. We know this. So what did you do? You took the report and you tried to poke holes in it because you knew, okay, what are they really after here? And then I think you also found that that Hindenburg report was also kind of somebody else had written a lot of that previously.
The Orcafin. Yeah, he did it.
Orcafin, yeah.
Could we just share my screen one more time?
Yeah, I got you.
And then I'm going to get off my soapbox, guys.
Oh my gosh, this guy.
All right. If you are even entertaining the possibility about this Telegram arrest, and I understand there is criminal activity happening on Telegram, all right, but if you really believe that Pavel Durov was arrested because of child sexploitation on Telegram, look at this picture and then reevaluate that position. Do you really think this is about stopping the child sex trafficking? Do you really think it is? Because the government has the power to stop this today if they wanted to. The government has the power to tell us who were these rich, powerful people all over the world who were flying on this guy's plane and patronizing his establishments. All right. They know, and they still won't tell us. So do you really believe that thing about the Telegram guy, honestly, or does it have to do with something else? Again, that's all. We can get his face off the screen now. Who did not kill himself, by the way.